us for today's webinar. This is the first webinar of 2016 for the Park Service Scaling Up effort. As most of you hopefully know, scaling up is one of the call to action items that the Park Service Director has encouraged us to work on and to think about. Call to action, of course, focuses on large landscape conservation. It doesn't just focus on natural resources. It has to do with recreation, cultural resources, etc. But essentially, it's encouraging us to look beyond park boundaries to better protect park resources. As you can see right now, this is the Park Service Scaling Up website on the Practitioners Network. This is publicly available. You're now looking at an internal Park Service toolkit that Park Service folks can look at as well. So I encourage you all to explore these two websites and learn more about the Scaling Up effort. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Sherry Esperson.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. This is Sherry Esperson. I'm with Park Planning and Special Studies Division here in Washington, D.C., and at least where I'm calling in from. And I am a member of the Scaling Up Policy Work Group, co-convener with Marcia Keener, and just want to say a special thanks to Marcia Keener of the MPS Policy Office who helped coordinate today's webinar. So just want to thank everyone for joining us today for our joint National Park Service Bureau of Land Management Scaling Up webinar presentation on using the Service First Authority to enhance landscape conservation. The Service First Authority allows for innovative partnerships between U.S. Department of Agriculture and DOI, Department of Interior agencies to work beyond boundaries and to use and transfer funds across agencies. So today's webinar is going to focus on Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument, cooperatively managed by MPS and BLM. But we hope by the end you'll see how Service First can help your park or program if it hasn't already. And we'll have time for Q&A as well, and hope you'll share some examples as well. Today's presenters are Rosie Pepito. She's MPS Superintendent at Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument based in St. George, Utah. Another presenter is Mark Wimmer with Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument. He's the manager, a BLM manager, and has a background in range and NEPA work and reports to the Arizona Strip District manager. And our third presenter is Joan Guilfoyle. She's BLM's Service First coordinator based in Washington, D.C. So with that, I'll hand it over to our presenters. Joan, will you be starting?
Yes, I will. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
So good afternoon, everyone, or if you're in the other time zones, good morning. I am Joan Guilfoyle, as she said. I am technically working for the BLM, but I am on detail to the Department of Interior as their Service First coordinator. I'll tell you at the end of my 5 minutes what we're trying to do to get more support in the WO here for you folks in the field in terms of Service First. But I am on detail with the department, so I'm kind of speaking for them today, not just as a BLM person. I am a former Park Service person, by the way. I was in the Twin Cities for 6 years before I came to DC, so I know a little bit about what it's like to manage and work in national park units. So the first slide that you're seeing there is, of course, of the Parashant, which is nice to look at. No, stay at that one, please. Thank you. I visited the Parashant years ago, and it's really a remarkable property, as many of the properties you manage are equally amazing. This one is not remarkable only because it's jointly managed, but I think it is very special and a great example. So I think it's wonderful that Rosie and Mark are going to go into that more for us. I'm going to take the first 5 minutes here to talk about the Washington office level of Service First, not the operational part, the nitty-gritty of how you do agreements and work through some of these administrative barriers. That's what Rosie and Mark are going to do. I will say that the Parashant uses Service First authority possibly to the maximum degree possible. But don't let that scare you, because you don't have to use Service First authority to this degree. There are many other simpler agreements, simpler uses of it than the extent to which these two agencies have integrated their operations at this unit. So I would invite you to really use it as best fits your situation, and maybe if it does feel like it's something that can benefit you, start slow and then move into the more complex pieces. The most important thing I will say about Service First is if the people, the managers, want to it work and the partnership work, that makes all the difference. No law, which this is, can do anything for you unless the partners are really willing and want to take this collaborative approach to managing resources. So attitude and ego never should get in the way of partnership. You'll hear some horror stories probably out there of some challenges with individuals in Service First units, but hopefully you all folks are going to be intensely collaborative with your partners when you choose to use this authority, and I hope you will look at it. So next slide, please, Brian. I hope you've all had a chance to go to the website. This is what it looks like. It is managed by the Forest Service for us, and if you can see on this page, there's a ton of information in there. On the upper left, right under the word home, there's an overview page, which actually is the next slide. I will just go to that one, I guess, please. Okay, thank you very much. So I would go in here and navigate around and see what you can find. There is a ton of information in here, including copies of the authority, the resources and tools, sample agreements, where Service First is being used, etc. But this overview page, I think, is pretty important. As you can see where it says Service First has 3 broad goals, Service First gives you the opportunity to do these things with your federal partner agencies. So it's only Fed to Fed, and on the left-hand side there, under my name on the left, that dark blue tab, you can see all the agencies that are currently under Service First authority. It was expanded last year to all of USDI, all of USDA. But these are the agencies that have actually finished the agreements and are on board with an MOU and with the national agreement. So the big 4 that started Service First, Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, BLM, and the Forest Service. Actually, BLM and the Forest Service were the very beginning, and then the other 2 big land management agencies came on board. Now, you also have included, as you can see here, Bureau of Indian Affairs, brand new to the authority, Bureau of Indian Education, Bureau of Rec, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, Office of Surface Mining Reclamation and Enforcement, and USGS. Right now, those are all of the potential Fed partners that you can work with. All of them have signed the agreement and the national MOU. The authority has been permanent since 2012. It was under temporary status for many years before that. And without trying to tell you everything that's on this website, of course, I'll tell you it's broader than the Economy Act, which does not really allow for co-location and leasing. It doesn't require an economic analysis like the Economy Act does. And what it really also allows, which is quite unique, is it encourages the agencies to waive or negotiate down what a fair indirect cost or administrative fee would be. Some of the agencies completely waive the fees between themselves when they transfer money. That is something you can negotiate with all of these various partners, and it is unique to Service First. If you can go to the next slide, which I think is taking us back to the parish. So let me just say, here in DC, I've been trying to get the USDA agencies, the rest of them, helping them get the paperwork done. APHIS, NRCS, ARS, etc. They are in the process of coming on board. They're not here yet. Taking advantage of this authority, though, I will say, is entirely up to you, but I really recommend you look at it. I think Rosie and Mark can tell you getting the initial agreements can be laborious, but I think the payoff can be good. And if you can do 3 things or one of 3 things with it, it's worth the effort. Do better for the public, customer service, do better for the resource, land management, and do better economically, saving money, more cost-efficient operations. One of the simplest things to think about could be joint visitor centers. all the way to even a place, consider somewhere like Chaco Canyon that I think is surrounded by BLM property. Should those two agencies in that location think about entering into a service first agreement that would enable both of them to better meet their mission and maximize their resources by working jointly? Last thing I'll tell you is right now I am the only service first person, I think, definitely in Washington, maybe in the government. But once USDA comes on board, we are going to work with both departments to get points of contact in each agency to help solve the problems. Because there will be some, I'm sure Mark and Rosie are going to share them with you, but we need people out here in the WO to help facilitate and continue to break through some of these barriers that just pop up administratively. That's my 5 minutes, and I want to turn it over to Mark and Rosie, and I know there'll be Q&A at the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Joan. This is Rosie Pepito, Superintendent at Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument. We're just going to be calling it Parashant through this whole program here, or presentation. And so I just wanted to let you know that Parashant was created by presidential proclamation on January 11th of the year 2000, and this was under the Clinton administration. Under that proclamation, it says the National Park Service and the Bureau of Land Management shall manage the monument cooperatively and shall prepare an agreement to share, consistent with applicable laws, whatever resources are necessary to properly manage the monument. So, what the heck? New stuff. So what we ended up doing is taking a hybrid approach, and we decided to manage as if we were one agency. And what we did is we took the strengths of both the NPS and the BLM and leveraged those strengths to make things work. One of the things we did is we just kind of, for the sake of the staff, we came up with a motto, and that was everything Parashant. So what we ended up doing is we looked at the monument first, agency second. We co-located into one building as we felt that this would really help us work seamlessly across agency lines. And then whenever we could, we maintained a blended look with the staff wearing sort of this hybrid Parashant logo shirt when we were dealing with the public. But we also still wore our agency uniforms when appropriate, and of course we continued to follow our agency mandates. So we blend our resources and we blend our staff. And if you could switch to the next slide, please.
Okay, so this is Mark Wimmer. I'm the Monument Manager for the Bureau of Land Management for Parashant. And you're looking at our table of organization. And some of the things you'll note here is, first off, is that we have cross supervision. We have a couple of, any one of the green icons, or green boxes rather, are NPS funded. And then we have the ones that are kind of the orange look, depending on your monitor, are the more of they are the BLM funded positions. And so we've got cross supervision on those, and we also have interns that we use a lot through the program. So I supervise the ecologist and the physical scientist, who are NPS employees, and they in turn supervise interns from various sources of funding. This is just what's going on right now. They're supervising NPS funded interns. And then we have BLM employees supervised by Rosie on the other side there, the archaeologists, and the outdoor rec planner indirectly supervised through our chief of interpretation. So, and we have interns that are BLM funded on that side, as well as National Park Service funded interns. So we've got quite a mix that's integrated in there. And I think what Rosie said earlier is really key. We said that Parashon is first, and then our agencies are next. And so one of the brief examples we'll share is we had our National Public Lands Day last fall, and we had not every single hand on deck, but we had different agency representatives out there in the field doing little presentations and things for people to come around and see. And it was a real good effort that was put together in a way that it didn't matter who you were working for, so to speak, what agency you were with. We were all one concerted team out there. And so that's our goal, and we continue to manage towards that goal and achieve it on a regular basis.
So along with that, we usually have a lot of challenges, and luckily we have a lot of successes. So if you could switch to the next slide, please.
Okay, so one of the first challenges that I've encountered here, and it's always an ongoing thing, are IT challenges. IT departments for each agency don't always have the same protocols, of course, as many of you probably know. And so one of our ecologists came to us and said, you know, we have been here for a little while. Some of our staff had moved on to different positions, and so historically they were able to get BLM logins to actually use IT services, shared drives, Citrix servers for GIS applications and others. And so consequently, if you're a BLM or an NPS employee who'd been here for a little while, you maintain those. Well, BLM's policy changed, and they no longer issue new credentials or sign-ins for employees as they were bringing them on. So we're still working through this to correct it, to get our new employees that come on sign-ons, because we're using the BLM infrastructure for our shared drive and the Citrix server for ARC, map, and other applications. So that's one of our challenges, and we've made some progress recently on that by some recent calls with both National Park Service and BLM IT staff to get this kind of resolved. But we're still working through it. But fortunately, I think we have a way forward. But one of the key parts of this was making sure that our IT understood and knew that we were not only mandated in our proclamation to work together, but under our agency agreements that we had worked through, that we would share infrastructure. And that helped IT understand that. So there's a lot of communication that's required to help them understand where we're headed, and that helped resolve the issue.
Yeah, and a lot of this is coming about because of changes department-wide or government-wide, and it happened because of the use of the smart card, and now switching over to the smart cards for access into the computers. This is also affecting communications with dispatching and chains of command that we have. NPS works through a regional protocol, whereas the BLM works through a state protocol. As a superintendent, I can actually make decisions that are at a higher level for the BLM. So it can be actually pretty interesting where I can make a decision and then we have to wait and get state approval with the BLM on their side. So there's some lag time that we are working with, but we're working through that, and where we can, and I know Marcia with policies probably on the line, we push the envelope as much as we possibly can to get things done. With our agency relationships, Joan mentioned that you've got to throw ego out the door, and it really depends on personality. And here we've made the commitment to make service first work. So there are times that we get very frustrated with some of the roadblocks that we're working through, both internally and externally. And so, I think it's that understanding and having people that are willing to be pretty open-minded and creative to get things done.
That's a big important thing, is you have to be open-minded on all of this, especially and patience. It takes a lot of patience because of the different identities that we are assigned to, whether you're BLM or NPS. And so it's everything from having a mapping kind of resources for the public, naming conventions, what we call it. We say we're a monument, and the public misunderstands. Oh, well, you're a monument, you're NPS, right? And we're like, well, no, we're both, BLM and NPS. And so there's a lot of communication that comes into that to help both our internal and external partners and the public understand where we're coming from. And so I would say, too, with that is back up to the second bullet, is there's a whole bunch of communication and clear communication and dropping the whole egos and the things to be able to get this done. And so when we do that, we're successful. When we don't do that, we're presented with greater challenges for ourselves.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're also finding is that people don't know whether we're NPS or BLM. And so we end up not even showing up on either agency's maps, or because they just don't know where to put us. And it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. But I think we're still trying to work through that and educate the public as to our joint nature between the NPS and BLM.
Another one of the challenges we have, too, is regulatory compliance, especially through our State Historic Preservation Office programmatic agreements the Bureau of Land Management works through versus the agreement or the very direct relationship the National Park Services works with the State Historic Preservation Office as we try to get NEPA work completed and get work done on the ground. And so there's a trick to each one of those, and it's very challenging at times. But again, it requires patience, and as we develop the relationships of trust, we're able to use that and broker that to help our agreements go forward, and we're more successful in the end. And trust builds, and then momentum builds. So when we come back to the table with some kind of project, we're seen as credible, and we're able to get things done. So this is always ongoing. Relationships are extremely important, and they're sometimes fragile. And so it's something we have to be very careful with.
For funding and budget, that can be pretty, well, we found that pretty challenging at first, and then we found that Service First actually made things go more smoothly, especially with moving money back and forth between agencies. We were able to do it with 2 pieces of paper, and now with changes in agreements and budgeting processes, it's now gone back up to 5 pages of paperwork that we have to fill out to be able to move money back and forth. Also, one of the challenges we've found out within the agreements is the terminology, and using terminology like memorandums of understanding for the BLM is different from the National Park Service. And so when we were even putting together our agreement, which was a cooperative agreement, we ended up calling that an assistance agreement so that we could work through both agencies' budget processing and procurement.
And so with all of this, the authorities and the protocols, we just have to pay close attention to. Again, this is something very simple. Physically, our offices are right next to each other. So we're able to just be right across the hall. We're always talking, always visiting, and making sure that we're on the same page. So that helps us both understand and learn the authorities and protocols that we're each tasked with working under, and that leading to us to be able to leverage our resources and be successful in getting something done on the ground for the public.
So with leveraging of resources, we're using each other's vehicles, we're using each other's funding, each other's staff, just to be able to operate. BLM handles our grazing, NPS handles cultural resources, BLM handles natural resources, and so forth and so on. So we just kind of decided to divide and conquer. And if you switch to the next slide, please.
Oh, and so some of the things that we are able to do when we're able to leverage our resources properly is we're able to get NPS or BLM interns working out on the landscape. This is a picture of one of our interns, Mitra, and she's setting up an acoustical air quality monitoring station on BLM land. And so we've really benefited on the BLM side, I would say. I'd really say that we benefited from the NPS interest in some of these parameters for air quality and acoustical monitoring that has allowed us to get some science done on BLM that most BLM offices don't see.
So next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So what we've been doing as far as our blended operation is we have our NPS physical scientist who is actually the BLM state cave program manager, and we are working within BLM caves here collecting samples of microbes that are white nose syndrome resistant. So bringing in a lot of new science, using each other's resources, and as well as funding. And so we are actually getting both BLM funding and NPS funding for these programs. Next slide, please.
And this next slide is shows some mist netting for bats. We also have some research going on for acoustical bat signature sounds. We're able to record bats with high quality equipment, for recording equipment, and then be able to match it to a database to capture the sounds of bats in the area that we expect to find and determine if we have others in the area. So again, another example of some scientific research we wouldn't usually see.
Next slide, please. And so what we're seeing in this last slide is one of our most wonderful achievements was our night sky designation, international night sky designation for the parachute. This was the first for the BLM, and it was quite a struggle working with the International Dark Night Sky Association. What was happening is that the designations were basically geared with NPS terminology, and we felt that in order to bring in other agencies into the whole Dark Night Sky program, we had to find neutral terminology that was sensitive to other agencies. And so with this designation, again, like I said, it was the first for the BLM, but we were able to convince the International Dark Sky Association to change their terminology. And we are looking at, even though it's a dark night sky park, they have decided to come up with the term sanctuary to be able to bring in other agencies within that. So recognizing those sensitivities and forcing the issue with some of these entities that are not familiar with other agencies and working with other agencies. So with that, there are, we aren't the only ones that have service first agreements. And actually, Eric Bruneman put together a service first agreement between Badlands and Minuteman Missile with the U.S. Forest Service. And that particular one is to exchange visitor center interpretive staff, operate their visitor centers, as well as share exhibits, media, IT technology, public programs, signage, and also coordinating big national events. And currently, he's working on another service first agreement between Guadalupe Mountain and the Lincoln National Forest on there. So again, people being creative, sharing resources, and hopefully making things work in, cost-effective wise and efficiency. So with that, I guess, can we open this up for any questions?
Oh, thanks, Rosie and Mark and Joan. Great. Yeah, we can go ahead and open up for questions now. Thank you.
Rosie?
Yes.
This is Michael Reese at the Denver Service Center.
Hi, Michael.
Hi. One question for you. Is the Grand Canyon Parashant, is it considered a unit in the National Park System?
Yes, it is. And also a BLM National Landscape Conservation Unit.
Okay, thanks.
Brian, this is Joan. I have a comment if we're waiting for another question.
Go for it.
I just wanted to say, Mark and Rosie reminded me that the department where I'm working right now is very interested in the agencies collaborating, particularly in the co-location aspect. I think the philosophy is kind of, as they said, their offices are right next to each other. It's very easy to collaborate, but their staff are co-mingled. So co-location opportunities with any of the Fed agencies, whether or not you actually do joint land management is another factor, but I think it's a beginning. And I will say the department recently decided to fund one co-location that was proposed because they had said how they were also going to work together on the land, but to not fund one that was only about co-locating. So I think the collaborative landscape management and resource management, I think, is part of the things they're interested in supporting with some of their funds. So.
Yeah, this is Mark. I might add too that we are in an ongoing effort to co-locate the Parashant building with our Riverside building and also with the National Forest Service and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So we're still working to get even closer together with our other partners in the area.
I thought I saw a question go up.
Yes, we have a question from Chris Davis. The answer to this may be obvious, but does anyone know of an example of a service first arrangement when agency lands are not adjacent to each other?
I think there's some in the Forest Service in southwest Colorado like that, but I could be wrong. But that's something I could look up into that. But I'm sure others have examples too.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. That's a good question. I will say a lot of the visitor centers that are joint operations, I don't think, especially in the Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of them. I'm not sure their lands are necessarily contiguous, but they have joined together for the visitor service aspect.
Thank you.
And I also forgot to mention, this can also be NPS to NPS unit. It doesn't have to be with another Fed agency, but if there's monies to be saved or improved services by park units working together, Service First can, I think, be an enabler for that as well.
Thanks. And another question, Jonathan Putnam at Park Service asks, are there any other co-managed MPS BLM areas, and do you share ideas with them?
There is Crater of the Moons, but they are not co-managed like we are. But we have used their hybrid signage that they developed, and it was perfect for both NPS BLM lands. So I think that's about the only idea that we've actually really worked with each other on.
Great, thank you.
And for those of you who aren't familiar, in Las Vegas, Southern Nevada, Lake Mead has been in partnership very intensely with the other 3 large ones, Forest Service, BLM, and Fish and Wildlife, for many, many years, a complete executive board and 14 interagency teams, and they're doing astonishingly great work on the 11 million acres that they jointly work, that are contiguous for the most part, but that they co-manage kind of outside of Las Vegas itself. That they have a whole website too. You can Google Southern Nevada Agency Partnership. That's what that's called.
Great, thank you. We had a question from Tucker Blythe, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, at Wichita Battlefield, and they have a service first agreement with the Forest Service. Their lands are not contiguous, and they're currently co-located and looking at sharing a resource position. So I'm sorry, I think he was just offering that as an example. If there's anything else you want to add, Tucker, just let us know. Thank you for that. Michael Reese, do you want to mention? Michael, you had a question? Michael Reese?
Yeah, I have one more question. Does your unit have a general management plan or an equivalent comprehensive plan? And if so, how difficult was it to get the plan written and approved?
Yes, we actually do, and it is we call it an RMP GMP because, again, semantics with the agency. And actually, we worked closely with each other on the planning of it, and yeah, I don't remember that much difficulty at all in actually getting it approved. We just went through each agency's process, even though it was a combined plan for the approvals, but we were able to get it done.
It was a matter of signatures.
Yeah.
And I think, just getting the right signatories on the document, and then once that was done, it's a useful document across the board. So.
Yeah, and that was completed in 2008, or the record of decision was signed in 2008.
Thank you. Is that good, Michael?
Yep, thanks.
Great. Thank you all. Also, Cass, did you want to, I think Cass Hardy had a question, Park Service, but one question was, can you briefly explain what the process consists of to put together an agreement, such as a timeline, who fills out the paperwork? Can the money come from multiple parties? Are there restraints on what you can use the money for? For instance, can you pay for an employee's salary? Lots of questions. So I don't know if you want to take a crack at the first one, maybe.
Well, actually, we have an interagency or a service first agreement that we are doing with one of our universities, and it is to fund the internship program that we have. So this is with Southern Utah University and our intergovernmental internship cooperative. So what we ended up doing is that one agency would just take the lead, but we were all in communication with each other on it, and the dollars can come from multiple parties, and the restraints on what you can use the money for is what is outlined within your agreement. And so, yes, you could pay for another employee. In fact, the BLM pays for half of one of our NPS employees, so that's not unheard of.
Great, thank you very much. jumping, and I think we have a few. I realize we've gone over, and hopefully folks can stay on a little longer. We're going for a few more minutes for questions as they keep coming. Hopefully that's okay with the presenters. Just to jump back from an earlier question from Jonathan, and I'm not sure the last name, but he says, you may have already addressed this as I joined late, but what agencies and jurisdictions can use the Service First Authority? Can it be done between MPS and a state agency, or just federal agencies, or just DOI bureaus?
Right now.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Joan. You would handle this better, Joan.
Well, we both know the answer. It is only between federal agencies to federal agencies, so the USDI offices that are on the website and agencies, plus right now paperwork-wise only the Forest Service from USDA. As soon as the rest of the USDA agencies do their delegation paperwork, then it can be with them as well, but it is not with states. It is only Fed to Fed.
Thank you, Joe. So we have another question from Linda Slater. Can you recommend someone to offer advice on how to provide access to MPS email at a Forest Service site? MPS email can no longer be accessed on non-MPS computers.
This is one that I know is a challenge for one. We do have an interagency visitor center in another building that we have an employee that is a Forest Service employee, is also funded by MPS and BLM, and they've had some real challenges with this kind of situation. And I think what we're still working through, as I mentioned earlier on the call about IT challenges, is I think it's really important to make sure people in the IT shop understand the authorities and the agreements you currently have to help them work through it. A lot of times it's not always the technology that prevents it, it's simply some kind of firewall that's set up or some kind of parameter set up or policy that sometimes is a little bit more imagined than real. That being said, I get it that there are times when it doesn't happen at all. However, if you don't make the run at it by helping them understand the authority part of it and getting the right people involved and citing the right documents to them, it's difficult because they're waiting for a go-ahead in their hierarchy to do something outside of the norm. And so sometimes it's a real challenge, but when you come in with the authority to say, we can do this, just help us get to a solution, a lot of times the barriers drop and then you're able to just start working towards it. And I think that was important, is getting both IT staffs talking to one another.
Yeah, and really pushing the fact that this is service first and that there is an authority. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we can do this. So it gets past that trust issue.
Thank you. I think along, I think another question from Herbert Young, and maybe everyone can see this, but the U.S. Forest Service website, he lists that, has great info, but does Inside MPS have any info on Service First? Rosie, would you know? Or
not that I'm aware of. I normally go to the U.S. Forest Service site.
And the Forest Service is really hosting the agencies, and so that is the main go-to place. I suppose eventually if we have points of contact in the different agencies, there should be links between the websites to the Service First website, but because it's interagency, it's all at that one location right now.
thank you. I think we have time for one more question. I was seeing if there was any other questions out there.
I think there was one from Tucker Blythe.
Oh, Tucker was saying can be used between parks in the it was noted it can be used between parks in the U.S. I may have mentioned that before, saying maybe you can see ways that this would assist your Parker program. And so this was the first he's heard of that. Would this be a way to formalize the sharing of services between parks? Did you see it as a way to do that?
In my opinion, yes, it would. Even if it was just an MOU without any money transfers. Maybe they already have an MOU. What would this? Is there a need that he can express that they're trying to address?
Tucker,
Or is it just simply have it on paper? Yeah.
Can you join on the line, or?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
Hey, sorry about that.
Sorry.
I didn't know if I. Yeah, you know, we currently do share services with a larger park. We transfer funds to them, but it's not formalized. And I just finished the new Superintendent's Academy, and I think there's several park superintendents who are in a similar situation, and there's no formalized kind of, we're going to pay you for this service, or kind of what do we get for the money that we are sharing with you. So hearing that this is a possibility of a way to set up that system in a more formalized way is kind of exciting to me.
Definitely. The national agreement can be tiered. All the local agreements can be tiered to the national agreement. If you look at the website, there's a Park Service agreement number in there on the master national agreement. So I would think you could definitely do an agreement between parks that makes clear what the funds are for and how they'll be transferred, et cetera. You bet.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tucker. Thank you all. And I think we're on that. I was getting a note from Brian. I think we'll be wrapping up. But just wanted to, Marcia Keener, I know she's feeling ill and finding it difficult to talk today, but she wanted to thank the former MPS Policy Office SCA intern Emily Greer for her work in finding information about today's panelists, and that wanted to note that interns may be integral to exploring and staffing some of Service First Authority work. So with that, I just wanted, before I hand it over to Brian, just thank our presenters so much, Rosie, Mark, and Joan, for a really interesting discussion and presentation, and hopefully have got our folks thinking of ways that they can use Service First in their work. So I'll hand it back over to Brian.
Thanks, Sherry. Yeah, thanks again, everyone. I just wanted to put a plug in for the next webinar. It will be on the Consolidated Natural Resource Act of 2008, which also authorizes the MPS to work beyond boundaries. So if you're interested in Service First, this seems like another area worth learning more about. And that webinar will be March 24. Stay tuned for logistics and call information, etc. And with that, just want to thank everyone again for joining.
Thank you for hosting us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Bye-bye.